Bridgewater College. He was president the first 3 years. I was at Bridgewater College. This is my 8th year now. He started here in 1992, 1994. He was an alumni of Bridgewater College. Went on to get his Juris Doctor. He is a Lincoln scholar. He talks about Lincoln a lot. He's never really talked about him a ton in any of these lectures, but in the last one, he actually brought it up and connected it. We always ask him to talk about leadership, and he's always done a great job of keeping it very fresh for us because he changes things from year to year, so that it's always a little bit different for Dr. Heichman now. And so he actually talked at the last class a lot about leadership and connected with President Lincoln. Okay. If you've never heard him speak before, all of you are in luck because you'll get to hear him twice inside of about a month and a half. He is going to be the keynote speaker. Is that it? It is now at graduation, so you'll have an opportunity to hear him there. And he promises to keep his stories a little bit different between now and then. I didn't realize there were ever any bets made about when you would bring up Lincoln. That was beyond me. So anyhow, I'm going to let him go ahead and take it.
Thanks very much, and it's nice to be able to be with you today. I know that you're about to wind up, and so you're looking for careers in school and jobs and things like that. It'd be interesting to me to just know what some of you are going to do. How many of you hope to be able to go to professional graduate school next year? A couple of you doing that. That's good. Where are you going?
Hopefully the University of Maryland School of Nursing.
Oh, really? Good. How about you?
I'm going to Shenandoah for physical therapy.
Yeah, we've had a bunch of students go there, done really well. Anybody else? Professor? What about military? Anybody going to military? What kind of jobs, start over here, what kind of jobs you going to take, or hope to take?
I'd like to be like a strength and conditioning coach or a professional trainer, personal trainer.
Oh, good. How about you?
I have no idea. Right now, I'd like to go to school for PT, but we'll see how that works out.
I actually just got hired, become a police officer at home. So once I
Where is that?
New Jersey.
New Jersey?
Yeah. Once I'm done with school.
Chief Paterno brainwashed you, didn't he?
No, actually, I have 5 cops in the family, and I've wanted to become a cop my whole life.
So it's in the blood.
So it's in the blood. I have talked to Chief Paterno though. He's helped me out a little bit.
Yeah, he's helped a bunch of people. How about, what are you going to do?
I don't really know.
You're getting close. Family want to know. How about you?
Right now, maybe personal training.
Okay. Did you say school or
No, I'm applying to PTA school right now, though, so
where do you want to go?
whoever takes it.
Whoever takes it. How about you? You go to school?
Yeah.
And you?
I kind of want to work in a sports performance clinic or something like that.
We go to school.
You go to school?
I'm taking here, so I'll be in PTA school.
Oh, good.
I'm going to collegiate strength and conditioning.
I also got another semester left, so figuring it out.
Got some time.
Yeah.
I go to a sports performance clinic or personal training.
Do you know where you'll do it?
Not yet.
Would you,
Physician assistant. Grad school.
will you go to school for that immediately?
I'm going to take a year off, in which time I'll be riding professional.
Riding?
Riding horses professional.
Way to go. Yeah.
Radiation therapy or nursing.
I want to do PTA school.
Immediately or later?
Right after, yeah.
Where do you want to go?
I don't know. I'm still applying. I've applied to like 4 different schools, so we'll see.
Well, those are interesting careers, particularly for me, because when I started as president, those were not active careers. I mean, most of them, some didn't exist, and as careers. I mean, there are opportunities, maybe employment, but not collegiate training and doing it professionally the way you're going to be doing it. So that tells you how our needs change, and education has to change with it to meet those emerging needs. Well, last time I started speaking, I know you're trying to film this for somebody who's not here, so I'll try not to wander too much.
That's all right. You stay
Okay.
free. She can still hear.
I started last time talking a little bit about Lincoln. I may come back to that, but I'll start here where I ended up before, which was when I came to Bridgewater's president. When I'd been student in your shoes, I thought I should be president because I could get the place straightened out. I mean, all these rinky-dink rules and all this kind of stuff that I thought was wrong with the college, I could fix that in a heartbeat if they'd asked me. As I got older, I realized I really didn't know how to fix it, and so I didn't even dream of being a college president. So after the president of 30 years retired, the board asked me to do it. And I said, are you kidding me? I finally got good at a career. Senior partner in the biggest law firm in the Valley and president of Virginia Bar Association. Turned down a federal judgeship. I got a son practicing with me. I live on a 110-acre farm with our dream house and horses in the field. I mean, can't get any better than that. And I did it. Came here to be president. I don't know why I did that. I didn't apply, but I got drafted and loved it. But one of the things we needed to do was to change. We had good president, good leadership, good college. We were doing well financially and all the rest. But we had 857 students. And it seemed to me that we could not have programs like this one or other good programs as complete as they needed to be. Had the kind of faculty and additional staff and all the kinds of things we needed to make those programs possible, unless we grew. And so some of the things we had to do was to grow. How do you go about growing? Small colleges don't just snap their fingers and grow. And yet Bridgewater grew faster than any private college in Virginia except Liberty University, which is a little different type of program for those years. And some of the things that happened, we said was, if I do put myself back in the shoes of a student, the things that I did not like as a student, why put up with some of those now? Now that I do something about them, let me try to fix those. So I worked pretty closely with the students in terms of things we did. The double rows of trees that you take for granted going down the mall are so beautiful, particularly in the fall when the colors change. Those were planted. A bunch of the buildings were added. Obviously, we added students. We had probably the worst historical record in football in D3 in America. And at the press conference, when I was presented as a new president, someone asked me a question I was not prepared for. President Stone, what are you going to do about football? Football. And I said, we're going to be competitive. And when I got home that night, my wife saw it on television. She said, what were you thinking? And a few years later, we played for the national championship on television. So, yeah, we got that done. Well, I didn't do all that, but I hope I was one of the agents to get it done by turning to the students and the faculty and the staff and with as much talent as was here on this campus, and turn it loose and say, let's get it done. So we planted flowers and trees, and we painted things, and we picked up litter, and we improved the hours that things were open, and visitation hours in the dorms, all those kinds of things that made it a much more comfortable place to go to school. And you would change some more, I know that. Every student body has things that would also change. And we talked about any of those. We talked about, should it be a dry campus? Should it be 24-hour visitation? All those things we weren't afraid to talk about. We did talk about them. And they will continue to be conversations, I'm sure, in the years ahead if people want to talk about those. But one of the things I tried to do is to assert some leadership, using that term today, leadership in terms of trying to get it done. One college president cannot get it done. No way. And so what you will try to do, though, is to try to make sure you have people around you who really can get things done. One of the people I was able to recruit was, I had a classmate from Bridgewater who'd been a football player, baseball player, all conference, who went on to University of Tennessee, got his master's immediately after school, and then became a coach, was coach of the year very quickly in Roanoke. Vietnam cranked up. He was immune from the draft because his father had been killed in the Pacific during the war, World War II, so he was the child of he was really an orphan, a child of a deceased veteran. He was immune from the draft, we had a draft back then. But he volunteered, went to the Marine Corps, 2 tours of duty in Vietnam, stayed in the Marine Corps, became a full colonel, came to visit me because we stayed in touch a little bit after I became president. We talked about our dreams, respective dreams for his work and my work. Found out we have a lot in common in terms of our vision and our dreams. And so he went back to the ship where he was the strategic planning officer for the Atlantic Fleet. He called me and he said, I don't know why I'm doing this, but if you need me, I'm going to retire from the Marine Corps, even though I think I'm going to be a brigadier general in September, which is what I thought I always wanted, and I'll come to Bridgewater and help you. I went to his separation ceremony, and the man who was later chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was his senior officer. He told me he thought he was probably maybe the best Marine he ever met. Fabulous guy, leadership. He's written 2 books on leadership already. He's now president of a military school. He came here and helped me. In fact, he was such an effective man in getting work done that I finally had to say to him one day, Jim, when I'm thinking out loud that we ought to move Wright Hall off to the other side of the street, don't do it. Let's talk about it first, okay? He was such a gung-ho guy that if he thought you wanted it done, it got done, and it got done now. And so also, things were happening. Faculty was ready to buy into change, and they were great about talking about how we could do things to change the environment and make things even better. We had a great school, always did, great value system, great faculty, good values and all that, so it was a matter of just turning everything loose. And it's continued to flourish. Bridgewater College, I was chairman of the accrediting association that accredits all colleges in the South, 11 states, called SACS, and Bridgewater goes through an accreditation every 10 years, which is very, very onerous to go through that. Everybody groans until it's over. I chaired that, and so I visited a bunch of, I visited colleges as far away as Dubai, but I also visited colleges in Texas, Bible colleges, big universities, whatever. And I know that private colleges, almost no private college, unless they're the rich ones in New England, almost no private college could say they had a balanced budget every year for 18, 20 years, whatever it's been. Every year. And then you hear about small colleges having to go out of business or being very stressed because they don't have the resources. And here's a college like Bridgewater who's doing a lot of great things, a flourishing athletic program. Look at all the sports that are here. This facility here has been improved. It's really nice. Funkhauser Center was added while I was here. All those kinds of things that make life better cost a lot of money, and yet we've been able to balance budget. So leadership sometimes can just start with a spark, with a change. You come into a situation like you're going into, you're going to be the new person. What can be changed? What can be made better? Always be asking that. Well, let me tell you a little bit about my Lincoln story, since it's already been referred to anyway. The faculty members have to listen to it again. But I wanted to mention Lincoln not only because he's my hero and I want any excuse I can to talk about him. I just finished teaching a course on it over at JMU, Lifelong Learning Institute, and I got to talk about him a long time, and that was really neat. I won't keep you past the hour today, but I want to talk to you about Lincoln because Lincoln for me is such a good model for leadership. And the reason I say that is when he became president, in my judgment, he was the least qualified person to be president in the history of our country. He had 2 years of education, basically. If you put it together, he never had a full year at one time. He'd have a month here, a couple months there. Somebody would do a little blab school they talked about, because put everybody in all the grades in one little log cabin, and you recited out loud even though you were all reading different things. You can imagine what a roar that was. That's the way he learned. But he had this initiative to want to learn, and he read things that he had his hands on. And he did learn, then became the greatest writer in terms of just good prose. Everybody agrees. The best writer in the White House. Isn't that amazing? 2 years of education. And he's the best writer in terms of the narrative and the prose that we've ever had. Better than Jefferson, who was a real intellectual, and more modern presidents who were very highly educated. And if you go back and read things like the Gettysburg Address, the second inauguration, and you'll see some of the prettiest prose ever written in English. Well, how did this person become president if he's not qualified? He has no education. He has no reputation of any sort. His parents aren't known. They are impoverished people. His parents can barely sign their names. His mother dies when he's 9 years old. His father remarries. She has a couple children of her own, and added to the two in the Lincoln family. They have a log cabin, a big family, and no money. And poor Lincoln, finally, when he leaves his family, he's been living with them until he's 21, the age of emancipation. Then he goes over to start out, and he's first going to be an assistant postman in a little village where he's living. It was not a full-time job, but he's doing things to help people out, cutting logs and things. He was a powerful man, very, very strong man. Wrestler, cut boards and trees and things like that with a big axe. So he's highly respected as a very muscular, strong guy. Okay, so Lincoln hears there's going to be an election for the House of Delegates of Illinois and in his community, and he decides at the age of 22 he's going to run for office. And he doesn't know where the Capitol is. He doesn't know what he does if he gets elected. He doesn't know anybody in the legislature. These things need to be in politics, and people like him, so why not run for it? Well, nobody knew him outside the little town of New Salem, so he did not get elected. But it worried him to death that a couple people in New Salem didn't vote for him. He thought he should have all their votes, and he just thought he'd done something wrong, that out of about 100 votes in New Salem, he lost a couple. So that worried him. And that's a kind of a typical story of Lincoln about how popular he was when people knew him. Almost everybody voted for him when they knew him. The next time, 2 years later, he ran for office, and he got elected. The next time, he got reelected, and reelected, and reelected. Used to be on Wall Street Journal, have a big one-page ad on Lincoln's birthday every year, put up by one of the big corporations. Lincoln failed at everything until he was elected president. It was an encouragement to you that no matter how bad things get, you can always be like Lincoln, you know, and still pull it out. Lincoln was not a failure. Lincoln was a successful man. He got elected 4 times to the House of Representatives, House of Delegates in Illinois, and chose not to run again. He would have been a shoo-in. He wanted to run for the Senate, and the only reason he lost was because you didn't have direct election of senators. You had to get the whole legislature of the state elected to your party to get them to elect you to the Senate. And it was a Democratic state. And so when he ran against Stephen Douglas, he almost pulled it off because they got more votes than the Democrats who controlled the state, but he had to do it by district. And the way the districts were lined up, he couldn't get enough people elected, and so he didn't get it. Hardly a failure. And then when he ran into the election of 1860, he had been a congressman once in the Whig ticket. He'd been a congressman, very lackluster, nothing to distinguish him as a congressman. He'd been a country lawyer, had a lot of divorce cases, collection cases, criminal cases, not a lot of business cases. He did not represent these big businesses where he learned to know more about, a lot about finance and corporate structures and how commerce is done. He was a country lawyer, but a very good one, the best one in the area, and made good money, made a good living. While he was doing that, he decided after he came home from Congress in 1850, 41-year-old man, and he was through with politics. He saw he wasn't going anywhere. He'd been in the House of Delegates. He didn't want to do that anymore. He had been in Congress, didn't want to do that anymore. He knew that that was not something for him. And so he decided that he probably was going to probably stop politics. In 1854, the Congress passed the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which had the effect of permitting slavery to extend beyond the southern boundaries where it was already located and keep adding slave states. The Southerners wanted it because they wanted slave sympathy votes. They didn't want to lose their control of the federal legislature because they had a lot of authority in that legislature, a lot of voice. If non-slave states were added, they'd start losing their control. So it was important to them, and they were threatening to leave the Union and so forth. Stephen Douglas was saying, let them have it. Slavery, let the people vote on it. Lincoln said, you can't vote on owning people. So Lincoln refused, got into politics, drew a line, started making speeches, House divided speech, that kind of thing, and started getting some attention as a speaker. He went to New York City in 1860, in the summer, before the convention of the Republican Party to nominate a candidate. And he had this, he was 6'4", he weighed about 160 pounds, so he was tall and lanky and ugly, looked like he slept in his clothes. He had this screechy voice, not a good baritone voice like President Obama, something like that, just a screechy voice. And he stood up and he would say things that used to drive his wife crazy because she was really well educated. Mary Todd Lincoln had the equivalent of a college education for her day. She spoke fluent French. She believed he could be president. She's the one who encouraged him, but he didn't have her education. He used to drive her crazy. He'd go to the front door when there was a knock, and in his stocking feet, and he would say so-and-so, and he said, ain't you glad you seen me? And she, oh, that grammar just tore her up. That he just put on that country fine air, and he'd do it in the White House. Ain't you glad you seen me? And he just thought it was funny. She thought it was hillbilly, and she didn't like it. All right, now, so here he goes to New York, and he's speaking in Cooper's Union, which is a huge auditorium, several thousand people. And they've heard about this country guy out there in the West, out in Illinois, who's making these big speeches. And so they're anticipating, I want to hear what he's got to say. And he starts out, this tall, ugly, lanky guy with rumpled clothes, and he has a screechy voice. And they start laughing. This is the Abe Lincoln that's going to be president within a year. That's the impression he made. Before the speech was over, they were on their feet, yelling and screaming, giving him a standing ovation. I mean, he had that kind of effect because his voice carried well in a day before amplifiers. And as they got used to it and heard him tell funny stories and how good he was arguing against slavery and for the Union and all that, they saw how good he was. And so he started making an impression there. But in 1860, the only reason he got the nomination was because the Republicans were quarreling among themselves and couldn't get their act together. Then he won the general election because the Democrats couldn't get their act together. They had 3 candidates against him. So he didn't even get a majority of the votes in 1860. He got a plurality. He ran in the convention of 1860. The candidates did not go to conventions. You had to stay at home and let your supporters handle things. So he was in Springfield waiting for the news, as were the other candidates in their homes. So one of the deals, one of the things that Lincoln cared deeply about was that he wanted to make sure that people didn't make deals for him. And one of the guys who made a deal was a local judge who was a buddy of his who was helping him with the nomination, and he later became a justice on the Supreme Court of the United States. Made a deal that put the governor of Pennsylvania into the cabinet when Lincoln was elected as a kind of a deal. And Lincoln knew he had a reputation of being a crook and didn't think much of it. I'll mention later what finally happened to him. But Lincoln goes into this campaign, this convention. He's got a man running against him. Two or three men have been governors. One's been an attorney general of his state. These are people who have credentials. They've run things. They've been leaders of the party. They have a national reputation. They're known. Seward, who's supposed to be the shoo-in to get it, has been governor of New York, our most prestigious state at that time, and had been leader of the Senate. Knew all the ambassadors of the foreign nations. He lived in Washington a long time. He was a guy just perfectly prepared for it. The person that Lincoln was supposed to succeed was much better qualified to be president on paper. And yet he turned out, in my judgment, to be one of the two worst presidents in the history of America. James Buchanan. College graduate, went to Franklin and Marshall. Great school. Still there today in Lancaster. Not like Bridgewater, liberal arts, small college. He'd been an ambassador, he'd been Secretary of State, he'd been a senator. He had all these things. But when the Civil War started to emerge and this country was falling apart, he did nothing. He did nothing. And things got worse as a result. So Lincoln really had a problem at the time he got in. So here you got this man going into the convention in 1860, just got the luck that these stronger Republicans are vying against each other, and he comes in as a dark horse candidate. He's got the luck that the Democrats are falling apart in the general election over slavery, because the southern slave states won't make any compromise on anything. So even though Stephen Douglas is their candidate on the National Party, and he's racist to the core, I mean, he ought to be racist enough for them, they think he's not pure enough on slavery. So they want another candidate. And then there's a constitutional candidate, Bell. So without getting a majority, Lincoln wins. Lincoln goes in, he has a time between November and March. That time you didn't inaugurate presidents until March. So it is a long period. He doesn't know during that period whether he's got an army, if there is going to be a war. It's in fact got 15,000 people in it. 13,000 are fighting Indians out west, so they won't do him any good unless he brings them home. And now he's looking at this. He's looking at this situation, and 7 states pull out of the Union while he's sitting in Springfield. He's not even president yet, and 7 states are gone. 1/3 of all the Confederate Navy, of the Union Navy and Army officers leave their positions to go home to the South before Lincoln gets to Washington. 4 more states are talking about leaving. They're waiting to see what happens. The country's falling apart. Those Southerners are grabbing federal arsenals. Not only are the military men leaving their positions, they're now taking over federal arsenals in ports. Norfolk Port, example. It was a Union port, Navy port. Grab it. Harper's Ferry, grab it. And all the way down to the coast, so that only 2 were left when Lincoln came in, Sumter and Pensacola. So Lincoln comes in, and the day after his inauguration, he gets this message, and this is a crisis for leadership, isn't it? Not qualified. He gets this message from Major Anderson, who's in charge of Fort Sumter. I cannot hold out more than 30 days. Don't have enough food or munitions. So now Lincoln's got a real crisis. If he sends supplies down to Fort Sumter, the Southerners have made it clear they're going to fire on the fort and take it. We're going to war. If he doesn't send it, these men have to put up a white flag and leave, and he's lost one of the last 2 forts in the South, and looking like he's like Buchanan, not doing anything to stop the disruption or the dissolution of the Union. So he's got a real problem. Seward, the man who was so qualified to be president, is going to be his Secretary of State. Seward says to him, in fact, I'll be your prime minister. I know this is pretty much over your head. He knew he came from the West. He didn't know about foreign relations. He didn't know about military. He didn't know about politics. Seward could kind of run things for him. And here's Lincoln, who does not have the qualifications or experience, who has the courage and the confidence to say back to Seward, no thanks. I'll do this job myself. That's a hard job. It would have been so tempting, I think, to hand it off and say, hey, thanks, run with it, and handle this for me. They made a mess of Fort Sumter. Fort Sumter was made worse because the Lincoln administration didn't quite know how to handle it, didn't know what to do. They decided they would send a ship down there. They found out that one of the members of the cabinet had already sent that ship to Pensacola, and this was before the days you could telephone them and say, come back. So they didn't even have the right ship. Lincoln finally said, I'm going to send a ship down there. He told Senator McGuire to the governor of South Carolina, I'm going to send a ship down there, won't have any troops, won't have any guns, and just give them food because they don't have any food. At that point, South Carolina and the Confederacy, there was already a Confederate government established, said, no way, and we're going to fire. So Lincoln had made it worse because Seward, his advisor, the man who wanted to be prime minister, had been telling Southerners still in Washington, there's no way we're going to send any ships to Fort Sumter. You can just count on that. And he advised against it. But he hadn't checked with Lincoln. He thought Lincoln would do what he told him. And Lincoln decided, no, you got to draw a line somewhere. And I'm going to draw it at Sumter. I'm not going to let them drive us out of Sumter. And so that's how the war got started. Now, it would have started anyway. I don't think there's any way you could avoid it Fort Sumter. I'm just saying that Southerners had some basis for believing that they were dealing with treacherous people in the Union, because Seward was telling them one thing, Lincoln was doing something else, and it looked like they were being duplicitous. That wouldn't have stopped them, but that had some effect. Now Lincoln is at the lowest point, I think, in his life. I said to the class right before this one that I can empathize with it because I've been there. Have you ever had one of those bad hair days where you think, I'm almost going back to bed because everything I touch is turning bad? Just nothing's working. Usually happens on exam day, doesn't it? You just not taking exams. And so the teachers will give you a break and let you pick it every day. But there are times when we just think, everything's falling apart on me. I can't seem to get anything right today. Poor Lincoln must have felt that way. 7 states out of the Union. He doesn't know if he can defend Washington, D.C. If Virginia goes out of the Union, and they did immediately after Fort Sumter when he called up troops, he didn't have any way to defend Washington. You ought to read sometime the story about what happened in Washington. Because after all, Virginia's right next to Washington. All they had to do is march in. The other thing that hurt him was that Maryland was pro-Confederate. They didn't join the Confederacy, and part of the reason was that Lincoln and his administration lined up cannons in front of their state legislature when they got ready to vote on secession and said, you probably you don't want to secede, I think. We got these cannons aimed at you. Because it was a slave state, very pro-Southern. So the first troops to come to Washington to defend the capital when Fort Sumter had been fired on, and Lincoln thought he needed some defense, were coming from Boston. When you came down to Baltimore at that time, you came down on a line that stopped in Baltimore. You had to take a carriage or walk or ride a horse or something, a mile, to get to a different rail line that went into Washington. While they were going overland here, people of Maryland threw rocks at the Union soldiers because they were going in to save Washington, and basically got a riot. A bunch of people were killed. They tried to shoot the soldiers coming from Boston. That's how perilous it was. Washington, D.C. almost didn't get defended. Lincoln was worried to death. When will they come? When will they get here? They had sharpshooters up on the White House and all over Pennsylvania Avenue. First time in our history we had to worry about something like that to protect him against assassination so he could get inaugurated. When he was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, on his way on train to come south to Washington to take the inauguration, they said there was such a strong conspiracy case developed again to kill him that they had to sneak him in during the night on a different train than the one he was scheduled to come in on because they thought someone was going to kill him. This is a hard time. So here Lincoln is at the very bottom of his life in terms of what he's got to cope with. Sumter's not going well. The country's falling apart. There's going to be war. He doesn't have any way to protect Washington. What do you do? And from that point on, and this is something I think it ought to encourage us in our own leadership activity. From that point on, Lincoln kind of decided to take a deep breath and just commit himself to fixing this. He learned from Fort Sumter. He didn't just wring his hands and say, I wish we'd handle it differently, or maybe if we put it off a little while, if we could postpone it, gotten to wait. He committed himself to fixing things. He learned how to be a general. He learned how to be an admiral. He would go down to the Navy Yard in Washington, D.C. and personally try out new weapons they were developing. He would get to the map and try to say he had what he called the anaconda theory of war, He said, the South is not as big as we are in terms of troops and everything. You take the anaconda, you swallow them up. Everywhere on both east and west, where Grant's fighting in the west and McClellan's fighting in the east, hit them everywhere all at the same time. Because these Southerners are just terrific at moving armies back and forth to support each other. We did it in the Shenandoah Valley. Stonewall Jackson would run up down the Shenandoah Valley where we are. Washington would be scared to death because they thought, that leads right into Washington. So they would bring back 100,000 troops from McClellan's army in Richmond. And then McClellan would say, well, I can't fight now, you took all my troops. And so this went on for a little while. So this was a hard time for Lincoln. And yet Lincoln prevailed. What are some things he did? Well, one, I think Lincoln had no ego. I think that's a characteristic of good leadership. Example is that when he was a lawyer, he had a big case in which he was going to earn a big fee. All he had to do was be local counsel. In the old days, because of the judges and the juries and things like that, you'd often get a lawyer in that town to work with you. I used to do it as a lawyer myself. I went into Richmond or some other city, I might ask one of the local lawyers to sit with me who knew the local rules and things like that, so I wouldn't make mistakes on those things, even though it was my case and I was going to have them. And so Lincoln was just basically going to be there for local color. But he's going to get a big fee because of big corporations. The lead attorney was a guy named Edward Stanton, who was one of the premier lawyers in America. Stanton was irascible, rude, talented, and a great lawyer. Stanton came in and said loud enough in the courtroom and saw Lincoln and said loudly enough into here, I'm not going to sit next to that gorilla. I am not going to have that redneck sitting at council table. That's what Lincoln heard for us first from Edward Stanton. Now Lincoln in 1861 has got this horrible mess on his hands. He's got the governor of Pennsylvania that his buddies made a deal with, even though he thought the guy's a crook. I wish I didn't have to have him. Who's now Secretary of War. And he says, I've got to get him out of here. So he claimed to the guy when he called him in, Secretary Cameron, he called him in, he said, I need you so bad, I'm going to promote you. I'm going to make you the ambassador to Russia. And poor guy said, I don't want to go to Russia. And Lincoln said, oh yes, you can really help me out. You go to Russia. So he got rid of him, and he turned into Stanton. Stanton was a Democrat. Stanton had humiliated him. Stanton was irascible, hard to get along with, and he owed him nothing. It was not political payoff. It was nothing except this guy's talented, and I need him, and I'm going to make it work. Doris Kearns Goodwin, the great historian, wrote a book called Team of Rivals. Maybe you've seen it. That is just fabulous about how Lincoln took the competitors he had in the 1860 convention and Stanton, who had humiliated him, brought them together as his cabinet. While they were in that cabinet, one of them, Simon Chase, was from Ohio, had been governor, senator, later became Chief Justice of the United States. Chase was trying to run against Lincoln in the 1864 election, but sneaking around to do it so Lincoln wouldn't know it, in Lincoln's own cabinet. And but Lincoln knew these things, and he put up with them. And somebody said, why don't you fire Chase? You know that he's trying to undermine you. And he said, Chase is doing too good a job printing money. Well, Chase was Secretary of the Treasury, and he was printing greenbacks. That's how we got started in American currency. It used to be local currency everywhere. And we started what we call greenbacks during the Civil War to pay for the Civil War. Because what you're really doing is taking IOUs from the government in the form of greenbacks. Well, Chase was printing these to pay for this horrendously expensive war. And he'd done a lot of brilliant things to get this accomplished. And Lincoln said, I need him. I don't care what you say about me, I need him. So people called him names, they ridiculed him. Lincoln turned the other cheek. War's too important. End of slavery is too important. Saving the Union is too important for me to worry about my ego. That is really hard. I don't care where you are in leadership. I don't care if it's on a sports team or a drama club or in a family, wherever it is. Our egos always tell us that we want to get even. We want to punish someone who humiliated us. We want to make sure that somebody gets their comeuppance. We love it when someone who did something to us falls somewhere, especially if we get to watch. Lincoln didn't believe in that. No time for it. The other thing was he believed you want to keep your eye on the ball. Don't get distracted by these other things. An example of that would be early in his tenure as president, early in 1862, the Union admiral, the Union captain of the Navy, heard that two Southern commissioners who were on their way from the Confederacy over to England to try to get England to recognize the Confederacy. which would be big trouble, because then we couldn't blockade the ports and everything because it'd be an act of war. So that was a big deal. We couldn't let England recognize the Confederacy. So this American Navy captain said, let's don't let them get there. He made the Navy, the British ship stop in the seas, said, give me the 2 commissioners. The British admiral said, are you kidding me? This is against the law of the seas. You can't do this. After all, Britain controlled the seas. And he said, I will, I'll blow you out of the water. So he took the 2 commissioners. England said, if you don't return those 2 Confederate commissioners to us, we will start a war with you. That's pretty serious stuff. And so Seward said, that's great. That's great. If they start something, the Confederates will say, look, our brethren are in a war. They'll come back. Or we will try to show how tough we are, that we won't let England push us around. The New York newspapers, the Washington newspapers said, sock it to them. These Brits have been pushing us around long enough. Go get them. Let them start something. I mean, the whole country was caught up with this idea. Do not give back those commissioners, Confederates. We're at war after all with the Confederacy. Lincoln said, one war at a time, please. Don't take your eye off the ball. We got a civil war here. I don't have time for a war with Britain. Keep your eye on the ball. Even though people are inflamed and wanting to do a certain thing, keep your eye on the ball. So on things that mattered, there were 2 things in his career that mattered, and on those he wouldn't budge. He was stubborn as a mule, he would not budge. On everything else, he was flexible. You want to do this, I can do that. I can do half this, you do half that. He tried to work it out with you, tried to make sure everybody could win something. One of those was saving the Union. That's why he fought the war. Lincoln did not fight the war to save geography. Geography was not important to him. I mean, I'm sure thought it was important. America had all this beautiful countryside and everything. But for him, it was the Union was the way people could govern themselves. In other words, if you looked around all over the world, there was no place that had self-governing republics. Even England at that time still had a king with a lot of authority and a lot of aristocrats, very much a class system. France was going through Emperor Napoleon III. Germans had the Kaiser still coming. You had popes and aristocrats and all these people. And when we were fighting the Civil War, one of the things the English and the French were saying in the newspapers, it's about time. Who ever thought a bunch of rednecks could rule themselves? They need class, high-class people, aristocrats. You know, these farmers and carpenters and people like that ruling themselves, whoever thought it could happen, could work. So they thought it was just in the cards. Lincoln looked at this and he said, look, if we fail at this, will it ever even be tried again? We've got to prove that people can govern themselves with freedoms and protections. That's what, when you look at the Gettysburg Address, it's more than a nice little speech to memorize when you're in grade school. If you look at those words, like the nature of government and what he's committed to, those are powerful words. That's why it's such a famous speech. And so Lincoln thought that the Union was the way you preserved this, and if the Union broke apart, were other states not going to break apart too over something else? Or wouldn't the South finally spin out of control and it would break apart over various things? And so finally, you know, about like Germany was at the time, maybe 75 little kingdoms here in North America. So anyway, the Union was important, non-negotiable. He would not stop the war. He was willing to have 600,000 deaths rather than stop the war. That's how many we lost. Worst war in our history in terms of deaths. The other thing was that by 1862, a year into the war, he decided that he was going to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. He was going to free slaves where he had authority. His cabinet recommended against it because he would lose the slave states that were still in the Union. Maryland, Kentucky, Missouri, and Delaware. They were all slave states. He said, I'm going to take my chances on it. They finally said, but we've been getting our nose bloodied by these Confederate generals, and it'll look like we're panicking if we do something dramatic right now. So Seward said, you probably ought to wait for a victory. Lincoln wasn't sure he was ever going to get one, but he said, okay, let's try that. This was in June. In September the 17th, the Battle of Antietam, we had the bloodiest battle in the history of America. Any war for Americans. More Americans killed in that battle than any. And since the Southerners were unable to move to the north, as they were trying to do when they got pushed back, even though it wasn't a slam dunk victory, it was close enough, Lincoln said, he announced to the public 2 days later On January the 1st coming up, I will issue the Emancipation Proclamation to free slaves where I have authority. And in all the rebel states, as the war goes on as we win, all those slaves will be freed. And it was dramatic. A lot of people talk about, well, it didn't have a lot of effect because you didn't have control over most of the slave states at that point and all the rest. Jefferson Davis went berserk. The Europeans said you're inviting race war. I mean, it was very controversial. Lincoln almost lost the election in 1864, much of it as a result of that. It was very unpopular. He refused to budge. He said 55,000 black soldiers are fighting for their freedom. Don't ask me to betray them. When people said, revoke it, bring it back. So Lincoln was non-negotiable on that. And so in the election of 1864, and this is where I think you have a test of real leadership, 1864, he was going to be defeated because of the fall of Atlanta and the Battle of Cedar Creek not far from here in Winchester. Notorious victories. He was able to pull it out because now people said, okay, it looks like we're finally winning. So he won. The interesting thing I want to point to, though, is that in that election, the soldiers out in the fields got to vote. The Union soldiers got to vote. And they knew that if they voted for McClellan, who was the Democratic candidate, he was a general. He was very popular with them. He was a really spiffy-looking general, good-looking guy, wore a uniform well, called Little Napoleon, called him West Point, and they liked him. Lincoln didn't because he wouldn't fight, but the soldiers liked him, maybe for that reason. They thought it was better than having to fight. And he was making it clear he didn't care about slavery. He wasn't going to fight a war with slavery. And probably going to negotiate a truce with the Southerners and end the war. And Lincoln was saying, I am promising you the war goes on. I am promising you, because I am going to see slavery end, and I will see the Union saved. We're going to see this rebellion. So the soldiers here are now facing, okay, I vote for McClellan, I get to go home. I vote for Lincoln. I'll never see Ohio, Illinois, Indiana again. I'll die in Virginia, North Carolina. I may not even have good attitude toward black people. What am I doing here? I don't even understand all this union business. What am I doing here? My family needs me. 80% of them voted for Lincoln. Imagine, 80% voted for Lincoln. A lot more than the general population, about 55%. What that tells me is, and I've done some work on this, actually may finish up a book I'm working on with it, on the nature of the leadership is that Lincoln's integrity counted. In other words, when his troops went to vote, they could say, yes, I'll go home if I vote for McClellan, right or wrong. I might very well die if I vote for Lincoln. They trusted him. They didn't understand the racial issue or emancipation. They didn't understand all about the Union issue. They trusted Lincoln. Trust is the ultimate ingredient, as far as I'm concerned, for effective leadership. And that trust comes not just in the President of the United States. There can be presidents who are effective for that 4 years, 8-year period. But frankly, eventually the role model aspects of their lives will catch up with them if there are problems. But whether you are doing something in a local PTA or teaching school or working in an athletic center or wellness center or doing physical therapy, whatever you're doing in your careers, there are always going to be these places where you are being looked at and saying, what is she doing? What is he doing? And that is your ultimate leadership opportunity, is leading by example. If you can't be a good role model, if you can't be able to speak to people around you and say, this is the way I think it ought to be done, then you're passing up a leadership opportunity. Leadership does not come by having someone write on your forehead, leader. It doesn't come by holding an office. It comes by being open to seeing need around you. I've used examples before. When I came here, I was really distressed that we had so much litter on this campus. So I started picking it up myself. And I go across campus, I ain't to students, wasn't used to nag you. But when I saw students, when students saw me picking it up, coat and tie and everything, a lot of them said, you know, I'll get to the next one or something. And pretty soon I think we had the place pretty nice. If you speak to everybody on campus, there's no excuse for not speaking to everybody on campus. When I came here, we didn't speak to everybody on campus, and I said we had to start. So I just catch people and say, hey, wait a minute, you didn't speak to me. And they look at me and say, but I don't know you. And I say, you know, we speak anyway. And if I wanted to go to a big city and walk down the street and start speaking to people, I realized I shouldn't do it, nor should I pick up litter in New York because it wouldn't, you know, lock me up. let people catch on to what you're doing. Let them see you and say, that's the way I think it ought to be done. That's the way you ought to live. That's the way you ought to behave. That's ultimate leadership. So Lincoln led ultimately through his integrity. He was called Honest Abe by his critics. Imagine today calling any politician honest blankety blank. I mean, can you imagine that? And so Lincoln, even though you had a lot of people just despised him, I mean, they were nasty to him, his opponents, they all said Lincoln is honest, but they want to criticize him. He had a great reputation for honesty. So whether you're watching a person you report to do something wrong, one of your peers do something wrong, or someone who's got some money, a customer, client, patron, whatever, is asking you to do something wrong, walk away from it. You're better off on welfare or unemployment compensation than to have to live with yourself for doing something that you know is wrong in your professional ethics or your personal ethics. It's just that serious. Because when you ultimately have to answer for what you did for your lives, you're not going to feel good about saying, I stole a lot of stuff, thank goodness they didn't catch me. That's no way to live. And so I think we all want to kind of pursue this whole model of Abraham Lincoln that I've been talking about, which is ultimately I want people to be able to trust me. I want people to believe me. I want people to think that when I do something or say something that I really mean it and that it's honest and that they can help me with this. Take responsibility. Watch for opportunities and take responsibility. Anything from picking up litter to environmental issues to making the campus a friendlier place. Try speaking to everybody. This is a friendly place. I know you speak to everybody. I noticed today a lot of people didn't speak to me. I test that because I used to go to campuses and say, I'll get back to Bridgewater, everybody will speak. Well, you don't know me, so you don't speak. Speak anyway. Let them worry about how they didn't remember you. They'll say, why did you speak to me? I know, should I know it? No, you don't. Speak. This is a friendly, small campus. Everybody speaks. And why? Because we're all one community. We're community. And if they don't belong in this community on a regular basis, then they're guests of the community, and they ought to feel our friendship and our hospitality. So even those things reflect leadership. Try it. You'll be surprised at the number of people start doing it too. That's enough for today. I've walked around the camera. I hope I didn't walk out of it all the time, but I want to wish you the best in your endeavors. I'll get a shot at you one more time. Maybe I won't even mention Lincoln at that one. I'll just, since I gave you so much today, but I do wish you well. Bridgewater College students are always making us proud. As one alumnus to new alumni, I congratulate you on what you're ready to do and hope you have good success.
So thank you very much, President Stone. Let's see, before we